with the cost of living, lifting up universal credit payments, Mr. Speaker, by cutting the tax that people, effectively pay, lifting the living wage. We're facing particular. But what we're also doing, and this is absolutely vital, is increasing the number of high-wage, high-skill jobs in this country. 420,000 more on the payroll than there were before the pandemic began, because we've had the fastest exit from COVID of any European economy, Mr. Speaker, because we had the fastest vaccine and booster rollout.
Mr. Speaker, it's not just the national insurance rise. Thresholds for income tax, frozen. A stealth tax on working people. The threshold for tuition fees, frozen. A stealth tax on working people. Local authorities forced to increase council tax, a stealth tax on working people. You can be as stealthy as you like, but you can't hide reality. We have the highest tax burden for 70 years during the middle of an inflation crisis. So I ask the Prime Minister again, why do he and the Chancellor keep raising taxes on working people?
Mr. Speaker, what we are doing is helping people with the cost of living, cutting taxes for those on universal credit, Mr. Speaker, as I have said, helping people with the cost of their fuel, Mr. Speaker, with the cold weather payments and the warm homes payments, Mr. Speaker, doing all the things that this country would expect, lifting the living wage, which this party, Mr. Speaker, introduced. This government has increased by the record amount, Mr. Speaker. And above all, the most important thing that we are doing is helping people into work. 500,000 people off welfare into work under our Way to Work scheme. More people in work now than before the pandemic began, and that is the record of this government. Labour, never forget, Mr. Speaker, there's never been a Labour government that left office with unemployment lower than when they...
Lots of words, lots of bluster, no answers. Word of warning, Prime Minister. That's not going to work with the police. I'll tell him why they're putting taxes up. Low growth. In the decade of Tory government before the pandemic, growth slumped. It was much, much weaker than under the last Labour government. If the Tories matched our record on growth, we would have £30 billion more to spend on public services without having to raise a single tax. Mr. Speaker, surely even this Prime Minister doesn't need someone else to tell him that he and the Chancellor are having to raise taxes because the Tories failed to grow the economy over a decade.
No, Mr. Speaker, I think everybody in this country can see that we've been through the biggest pandemic since for 100 years, that we've looked after the people of this country to the tune of £400 billion, that we put into furlough and all the other schemes, 11.7 million people protected. Everybody knows the cost of that, Mr. Speaker. And at the same time, in spite of all the difficulties that we have faced, we have now got the fastest growth in the G7. Absolutely true. We've got youth unemployment. At a record low, Mr. Speaker. We've got 3 times as much tech investment coming into this country as there is in France, twice as much as there is in Germany. Yes, that's absolutely true, Mr. Speaker. And never forget, if you want to know about Labour economics, never forget the last time they were in office, Mr. Speaker, when they were finally booted out, they left a note saying there's no money left. That's the way they run the country, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the UK...
Some people won't be getting more. They're here to hear it, so here's Donna.
Mr. Speaker, the UK has suffered the worst economic crisis in the G7. The Prime Minister has more chance of persuading the public that he didn't hold any parties than he has of persuading that the economy is booming. High taxes are not just the result of low growth. Under this government, we've seen a pandemic of waste and fraud. From the Prime Minister's yacht to government contracts for mates of ministers, they've treated taxpayers as an ATM machine for their mates and their lifestyles. Now we find, Mr. Speaker, they've written off £8.7 billion on PPA, and the Chancellor's writing off £4.3 billion in fraud. That's enough to cover the tax hike he's inflicting on working people. So why did this government block the National Crime Agency from investigating all the billions they lost to fraud?
Mr. Speaker, of course we despise fraud and those who steal from the taxpayer, and that's why we've already recovered £743 million in lost furlough money, Mr. Speaker, £2.2 billion that were stolen in bounce-back loans, and we will go on. But I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I am proud of what this government and this country did in securing record quantities of PPE and record time, Mr. Speaker.